Hello and welcome to Exposed News Outlet, where we shed light on topics that matter most. I'm your host, Andrea. Today, we're talking about the DOJ, how they withheld Trump and Epstein files, specifically implicating Trump, and Congress fights back, demanding their release, along with the survivor they're silencing this time. Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed and notifications are on. Check that notification bell, select all. What you're about to hear is documented, sourced, and verified. We are not conspiracy theorists here at Exposed News Outlet. We are journalists doing the job the mainstream media won't do. Let's go. Imagine you are 13 years old. You're taken to a towering building in New York City. You are abused. You go to the FBI. You tell them everything. Not once, not twice, but 4 times. The FBI takes you seriously enough to open a federal investigation. They forward your case to the FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., and then the sitting president of the United States takes over the Department of Justice. And 3 or 4 FBI interviews, the ones that name him specifically, simply disappear from the public record. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is documented fact. Confirmed by NPR, NBC News, CNN, ABC News, and a sitting member of Congress who personally walked into the DOJ and saw the missing files with his own eyes. I'm Andrea, and this is Exposed News Outlet podcast. And today, we are breaking down the most significant cover-up story in American political history. Stay with me. Who is this survivor? Background and allegations. Let's start with who this woman is and what she says happened to her. She's a woman from South Carolina. Her name is redacted in the public documents, but investigative journalists and members of Congress know who she is. She first came to the FBI's attention in July 2019, shortly after Epstein was arrested on federal sex trafficking charges as Jane Doe. Over the course of 4 separate interviews with FBI agents, she described being sexually abused by Jeffrey Epstein, starting up at approximately 13 years old. She said that Epstein's operation ran in part of South Carolina, not a location previously associated with Epstein's network. But here's where the story goes to another level entirely. She told federal agents that Epstein transported her, either by car or private plane, to a building in New York or New Jersey. She described a very tall building with huge rooms, and there she encountered Donald Trump. According to FBI 302 interview summaries, which are official sworn statements, she alleged that Trump forced her head down into his exposed genitals. She bit him. He struck her in the head and kicked her out. These are not my words. These are official FBI documents. Documents the DOJ tried to hide. Let me show you this clip of the Epstein Files missing FBI interviews.
Let's get to some breaking news that is still unfolding. The Trump Justice Department has just uploaded new FBI documents missing from the initial releases of the Epstein Files. Right now, MS Now is pouring through these new files. We are taking our time to make sure we get it right, and we want to be careful on what we report on air. Here is what we can tell you right now. 3 of these documents are FBI 302 memos, notes that FBI agents used to summarize witness interviews. These notes contain unsubstantiated sexual assault allegations against Donald Trump. Specifically, they detail an unsubstantiated account of a woman who accused Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein of sexually assaulting her decades earlier when she was just a teenager. One of the new documents reads in part, quote, Redacted was asked whether she felt comfortable detailing her contacts with Trump. Redacted again asked what the point would be of providing the information at this point in her life when there was a strong possibility nothing could be done about it. There are many redactions on these forms. Trump has long denied any wrongdoing connected to Jeffrey Epstein. To discuss, let's bring in MS Now senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin.
Lisa, again, I want to just reiterate what Alicia just said for our viewers is we are definitely combing through all of these because these are the 302s, these forms, these FBI interview intake forms were the thing that as we have interviewed survivors of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's abuse over the course of the last couple of months, the things that they themselves most wanted to see in the files. And so the fact that today we've gotten at least 2 of these by my count, you may have more, I think it's important. And it is important that we get this right. Talk to us. There's a lot in here. Anybody that has had a chance to take a look at these, they talk a little bit about blackmail. They talk about an intimidation campaign. Obviously, those allegations against then citizen Donald Trump. Walk us through how we should be looking through all this.
So, Simone, we have already seen a initial interview with this same alleged victim and accuser of both Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein in the files. We knew that there were 3 others. In fact, MS Now joined NPR and an independent journalist, Roger Sullenberger, and reporting on how we figured out that those documents were in fact missing from prior production. So the first thing I want to say is that we now know that these in fact existed, that they were in the Department of Justice's possession, and that their claims that these documents were duplicates is just not credible because in reading them, they don't sound like any document that any lawyer considers a duplicate. A duplicate is usually an email exchange or a text exchange where you produce one portion of it and then maybe you later see a longer portion of it. That is not what this is. What these are 3 additional Form 302s reflecting 3 additional interviews of this same woman, culminating in an October 2019 interview where, as Alicia just said, she tells the FBI that she is aware that because of when she alleges her abuse occurred, and specifically because it was in the 1980s, and we're now talking to her in 2019, she tells the agents that she's aware the statutes of limitation of any viable federal violation may have run. She asks the agents, what's the point? And I think the agent's response here is just as interesting as some of her allegations, as salacious as they are, and as unverifiable and unverified as they are, because the agent says all victims of crime should have the opportunity to tell their story, and they wanted to give her that opportunity if she wanted to, and she just didn't take it. To me, this is significant because we knew that this woman had allegations about Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump, who she says she met when she was a teenager, and that both of them sexually abused her. What we didn't know is how it ended. And now we're seeing that the way that it likely ended is that the woman refused to cooperate with federal law enforcement authorities. She said that she understood that Trump was the president. She had contact with him when she was a minor. And when she was asked if she was comfortable detailing it, she just again reiterated, what would be the point of providing this information at this point in my life when there was a strong possibility nothing could be done about it? That's at that point in the interview, the agents, and I'm reading from this 302, or rather I'm trying to characterize it, basically said, go home. Take an opportunity to think about it. We're here if you want us to be. And it doesn't appear that the woman ever availed herself of that opportunity. Instead, 2 weeks later, as we know from documents that are already in the files, one of her lawyers contacted the FBI and said, basically, from now forward, your communications with this alleged victim, they go through us.
Her ongoing fear, and it didn't stop there. In her 3rd FBI interview, she described receiving threatening phone calls and being almost run off the road by other vehicles. Threats she believed were connected to Epstein or Trump. By her 4th interview, she arrived without her attorney. She told agents she didn't know what the point was of coming forward, that the statute of limitations had likely passed anyway. The agents encouraged her to go home and think about it. which there's also been allegations of many threats to her life. We don't know what happened next in the FBI's investigation. We do know that in 2019, she filed a civil lawsuit against the Epstein estate. In 2021, it ended in a voluntary dismissal, reportedly with a financial settlement. She was also deemed ineligible for the Epstein Victims Compensation Program. We don't know why. What we do know is this: the FBI took her seriously enough to conduct 4 official interviews, forward her case to FBI headquarters, and include Trump's name in the initial PowerPoint presentation on prominent names in the Epstein and Maxwell investigations. Let me show you this clip of NPR Epstein Files DOJ withheld Trump accuser FBI interviews.
The Justice Department has published some additional Epstein files related to allegations that President Trump sexually abused a minor. That's after an NPR investigation found dozens of pages were withheld. NPR's Stephen Fowler reports.
Now let's talk about what the government did, or more precisely, what they didn't do. In November 2025, Congress passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act with overwhelming bipartisanship support. In fact, it was veto-proof. Trump signed it reluctantly, according to reporting, after opposing it for months. But again, he had no choice. It was veto-proof. The law required the DOJ to release all Epstein-related files within 30 days. Of course, that didn't happen. The DOJ released approximately 3 million documents. Sounds like a lot, right? Except, according to ranking member Robert Garcia, the DOJ collected roughly 6 million total documents. They only released half. They're sitting on the other half. Let me show you this clip of the official statement, the Oversight Democrats press release.
Ranking member Robert Garcia for Oversight Democrats. I'm going to make some brief statements, as well my colleagues, and then perhaps a question or two, and then we're going to get back to the deposition. As a reminder, this deposition has now gone on for about 2 hours, 2 hours plus 2.5 hours, and so that it will continue throughout the day. And so I'm going to be also respectful of not being specific, but we do have some overall statements to make. And a lot of this obviously ties into what the Secretary has already put out herself in her opening statement. Just want to begin by just clarifying and putting emphasis on something that's very important, and it's something the Secretary herself has said. Secretary Clinton never met Jeffrey Epstein. She never visited the island. She never flew on his plane. And she also had no knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein's horrific crimes. So zero knowledge of any wrongdoing. And you've also all heard that directly from her. Secretary Clinton is also completely cooperating with the deposition and the committee, and is answering questions in full faith and in good faith. What is not acceptable is oversight Republicans breaking their own committee rules that they established with the Secretary and her team, which you've all reported and you've seen by releasing photos. Not acceptable, and it was gracious of the Secretary and her team to continue the deposition. What we also want to say at this very moment is it's becoming more clear every single day is the questions continue to build around this DOJ and the White House and the focus of the majority. We want to understand right now where the missing FBI files are. These are files that accuse the President of the United States about serious accusations around sexual abuse. And the fact that they're not in the files and have been apparently either removed or discarded is incredibly concerning. And so we're calling on Attorney General Pam Bondi to immediately release those files. And lastly, I want to also add that this committee has now set a new precedent about talking to presidents and former presidents. And we're demanding immediately that we ask President Trump to testify in front of our committee and be deposed in front of oversight Republicans and Democrats. And that should happen immediately. He is the person that appears almost more than anyone else in the committee, and it needs to happen right now.
Mr. Chairman, do you distinguish at all between a president and a former president and a sitting president? I mean, is there something in there? Because they will say, wait a minute, we know what,
I think
what the court ruled on his immunity.
We should depose the person that is mentioned in the Epstein Files almost more than any other person next to Ghislaine Maxwell, and that's Donald Trump. We're gonna have a couple comments, and then we're gonna go ahead. I'm gonna answer a couple questions.
But here's what made this week explosive. NPR published an investigation finding that more than 50 pages of FBI interview records, including 3 interviews with the South Carolina woman, were cataloged internally by the DOJ but never posted publicly. Those 3 missing interviews, they're the ones that contain her specific allegations against Trump. The only interview that was released publicly, the first one. The one that doesn't mention Trump. Coincidence? Robert Garcia doesn't think so. And neither do I. He went to DOJ headquarters himself, reviewed the unredacted evidence logs, and came out and said, on the record, quote, there is evidence of a cover-up happening, end quote. But it gets worse. After Garcia and NPR went public with these findings, the DOJ scrambled. They claimed the missing files had been incorrectly coded as duplicates. An administrative error, they said. They released 3 of the previously hidden 302 reports, but Congress is not satisfied. The Oversight Committee pointed out that even after this partial release, millions of pages remain hidden. Key documents are still missing. The DOJ has not explained why. And there's one more jaw-dropping detail. According to Representative Garcia, the DOJ was also secretly logging the search history of Congress members who came in to review the unredacted files. Members of Congress being surveilled by the very department they were overseeing. Think about that. Let me show you this clip. DOJ spying Congress members' Epstein Files search history.
Some lawmakers are accusing Attorney General Pam Bondi of spying on their search history within the unredacted Epstein Files. This comes after Bondi was seen at a congressional committee hearing earlier this week, holding what appeared to be a list of files searched by Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. CBS News Justice correspondent Scott McFarland joins us now live. Scott, what do we know about this?
We know that the week began with the Epstein Files being an absolute hot mess, and the week is ending with the Epstein Files being an absolute hot mess. In this incarnation of the scandal, members of Congress who've been invited to view the unredacted, unreleased files at the Department of Justice say they're being tracked. They're being monitored, and their searches inside those files are being chronicled and cataloged by the Trump administration. They don't like that. That is a overstepping, they say, an encroachment on their powers, on their autonomy, and they want the administration to stop. There'll likely be requests for internal investigations as to why they're being inspected, why they're being watched. But this just perpetuates a story that has been going for months now and is not going away for the administration. They're being accused of not properly being transparent and handling these files, and the week ends with that remaining the overarching complaint.
You know what, Anna, what I really was stunned at is I gave her an opportunity to turn around on a very human level and as the head of DOJ and apologize right then and there to the survivors for what her Department of Justice had done. She could have taken that moment. It would have been very powerful had she actually issued that apology. But instead, she chose to try to confront me. I think she was flustered, thrown. by my request that she turn around and apologize. She didn't want to do that because they never want to admit that they've done anything wrong, but this was clearly botched. And the harm to the survivors was irreparable. And that is why it was so important to bring them into the room and to have her take responsibility. And the fact that she just kept attacking and trying to change the subject, we knew she was going to do that because we watched her Senate hearing. But I do have to say, it was so incredibly cruel, dismissive, disrespectful of those survivors who were standing right there waiting for her apology. I don't care what she does to me or to other members of Congress, other than the fact that she showed herself to be cruel and small and to have an audience of one, that was Donald Trump, not to be the people's attorney general.
We know survivors in that room have told us that they have really been in pain since the release of all these documents because of the bad redactions, that so many of them and their identities were exposed. That's led to more traumatization. It's led to more traumatization. I know you've looked at the unredacted Epstein documents, and you highlighted a couple of them at this hearing. The DOJ has said that these redaction issues were the result of, quote, technical or human error. Do you buy it?
No, absolutely not. And one of the posters that I showed was of an email that was titled Epstein Victims List. And there were 32 names on that list. And if you wanted to say that perhaps there were, the list got missed and that's why the names weren't redacted, maybe that would have, been something you could believe, except, Anna, that one of the names was redacted. So clearly somebody looked at that document titled Epstein Victims List, couldn't have been clearer, and decided to only redact one name. At the same time, the other side of this is the pattern of redactions of very powerful people that were part of Epstein's, massive sex trafficking ring that were protected. Their names were redacted. And so I really wanted to show both parts of that and the harm that that does, because the survivors who I've had the privilege of spending time with, they are amazing, courageous women who are continuing to stand up despite re-traumatization. But they really want there to be full accountability, and instead what they're getting is what they've gotten since the beginning of this scandal. They're being told to shut up, sit down, and they believe that the deliberate unredaction of their names, the exposure of their names and information, is an attempt to intimidate other survivors from coming forward, because who's going to want their names to be put out there in this way? And that's a permanent harm, not something that can be fixed, even if the Justice Department goes back and redacts those names after the fact.
During your time questioning Bondi, a Getty photographer captured this image. I want to show it to our viewers. It's a page within Bondi's binder that she had with her. The top of the page we can see is titled Jayapal Pramila Search History, and appears to show multiple search items related to the Epstein files. And this now asks House Speaker Mike Johnson about this photo. Take a listen.
Jayapal sees the DOJ is tracking her search history. Is that appropriate conduct?
I'm not going to comment on an allegation that is unsubstantiated. I don't know anything about that.
Attorney General Bondi testified, and she had a piece of paper that had Jayapal's search history in her binder of the Epstein files.
I don't know anything about that, and I'm not commenting on it. I haven't seen or heard anything about that.
Thank you,
but
sir.
That would be inappropriate if it happened.
Thank you.
I understand you spoke to the speaker about this. What can you share?
Well, I can't share what we talked about, but I made it very clear that this existed, this document existed. There's a photograph of it from a photographer in the room. It was in Pam Bondi's binder. It matched up with the searches that I actually did put into the computers. And this idea that the DOJ is spying on members of Congress using our search history as part of her burn book, that was the binder full of Oppo research on every single one of us as members of Congress, is absolutely unacceptable. It's a violation of the separation of powers. And I told Mike that, and I'm not going to reveal what he said, but I am going to say that we are demanding an end to that surveillance and a new process where we are assured that the Department of Justice is not spying on any member, Republican or Democrat, that goes into that room to search those files. That is our legitimate lawmaking responsibility, and we should not be surveilled and have that information try to be used against us in these hearings.
We heard a lot of your Republican colleagues at this hearing complain about their cell phone toll records obtained by Jack Smith's January 6th investigation. Would you expect the same kind of outrage from them about this sort of thing?
Well, I don't know. Listen, Mike Johnson did say publicly that he thought it was unacceptable. Other Republicans have said that they don't think it's appropriate. I've come to not expect anything from this Republican Party, frankly, but I would hope that many of the Republicans that I've worked with on surveillance and privacy issues, on FISA, on so many other things, would speak up and say this is absolutely inappropriate. It has to stop. And the Department of Justice has to be held accountable. We need an investigation. What information did they collect? Why were they collecting it? How were they going to use it? Why was it in her binder? These are all questions that the American people deserve to have answered.
Congress fights back. Credit where it's due. Some members of Congress are fighting hard. Representative Robert Garcia, California Democrat and ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, has been the loudest voice demanding accountability. He personally reviewed the unredacted files. He wrote formal letters to AG Bondi, and he went on every network he could get on. And this week, something remarkable happened. The House Oversight Committee voted 24-19 to subpoena Attorney General Pam Bondi to testify. That vote included 5 Republicans who broke with their party, 5 Republicans saying enough is enough. Watch this clip. House Oversight Committee Pam Bondi subpoena vote announcement, PBS NewsHour.
In the day's other headlines, the congressional investigation into files related to Jeffrey Epstein is widening. The Republican-led House Oversight Committee has voted to subpoena Attorney General Pam Bondi for what the NewsHour has learned would be a closed-door tape deposition. 5 Republicans voted with Democrats in favor of the measure. Bondi will be the highest-ranking sitting official to appear before the panel. She had already fielded Epstein-related questions during a combative appearance before a separate committee last month. It comes soon after lawmakers requested interviews with 7 other people, including the billionaires Bill Gates and Leon Black. Separately, the Justice Department says that tens of thousands of Epstein files that were recently taken down will be reposted soon, telling the NewsHour, quote, more than 47,000 files were offline for further review and should be ready for reproduction by the end of the week.
But here's the double standard that I need you to understand. Republicans use the Oversight Committee to haul Hillary Clinton in for a deposition about Epstein. Hillary Clinton, who all accounts had no documented personal relationship with Epstein whatsoever. She testified she had never met him, had no knowledge of his crimes, and did not recall ever encountering him. But Melania Trump, she appears in published photographs with both Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, who is currently serving 20 years in prison for sex trafficking. And the Epstein Files released at the end of January 2026 included a direct email from Melania Trump to Ghislaine Maxwell from 2002, 3 years before Melania married Trump. Maxwell responded, calling her Sweet Pea. Robert Garcia's response was direct. If you're going to bring in Democratic First Ladies, you must bring in Melania Trump. He has publicly stated he would subpoena both Trump and Melania the moment Democrats retake the House. Watch this clip.
Is exactly one First Lady in history who met sex trafficker and raper of children and good friend of Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein. And today, Republicans on the House Oversight Committee decided to question a former First Lady who never met Jeffrey Epstein instead of the First Lady currently occupying the White House, who was friends with Jeffrey Epstein and his convicted sex trafficking co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell. Donald Trump's third wife was friends with both of them. The Epstein files contain emails from Melania Trump to Ghislaine Maxwell complimenting Ghislaine Maxwell. The Epstein files contain no communication at all between Hillary Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell, but Republicans on the committee decided they wanted to subpoena Hillary Clinton. Where is their subpoena for Melania Trump, who actually knew Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell? Why aren't they asking Melania Trump? Did Donald Trump introduce you to Jeffrey Epstein, or did Jeffrey Epstein introduce you to Donald Trump? Why aren't they asking Melania Trump what she knew about Jeffrey Epstein? The Epstein files show the Palm Beach police chief saying that Donald Trump told him in 2006, quote, "Thank goodness you're stopping him. Everyone has known he's been doing this." If true, that would mean that Donald Trump's wife at that time, Melania Trump, knew he was doing this. She would be included in Donald Trump's term, everyone. Melania Trump might have no useful information to provide to the committee, but she did meet Jeffrey Epstein. She was friends with Jeffrey Epstein. She was friends with Ghislaine Maxwell. And it is possible that she knew something. According to her husband, everyone knew. Hillary Clinton, in a written opening statement to the committee today, made the point that not everyone who has been subpoenaed by the committee has been actually required to testify to the committee. The former Secretary of State, who was also a lawyer and worked on the Congressional Committee investigation of corrupt Republican President Richard Nixon at the beginning of her career, reminded the committee, quote, "You subpoenaed 8 law enforcement officials, all of whom ran the Department of Justice or directed the FBI when Epstein's crimes were investigated and prosecuted. Of those 8, only 1 appeared before the committee. 5 of the 6 former attorneys general were allowed to submit brief statements stating they had no information to provide. Hillary Clinton should have been offered exactly the same option. Secretary Clinton did provide the committee with a statement stating she had no information to provide, but the Republicans on the committee refused to accept that statement from her, the same kind of statement they accepted from other former cabinet officials. Secretary Clinton's opening statement was a masterful and thorough condemnation of the Republicans on the committee. She said, quote, "You have made little effort to call the people who show up most prominently in the Epstein files. And when you did, not a single Republican member showed up for Les Wexner's deposition. The institutional failure is designed to protect one political party and one public official." Secretary Clinton identified that public official by name repeatedly in her opening statement, saying, "You have compelled me to testify, fully aware that I have no knowledge that would assist your investigation in order to distract attention from President Trump's actions and to cover them up despite legitimate calls for answers. Ask him directly under oath about the tens of thousands of times he shows up in the Epstein files." Ask him directly under oath. That's right. Ask Donald Trump directly under oath about the accusation in the Epstein files that he assaulted and raped a child. Secretary Clinton, as a former senator, knows how congressional committees should do their work. She told the Republicans on the committee, quote, "A committee run by elected officials with a commitment to transparency would ensure the full release of all the files. It would get to the bottom of reports that DOJ withheld FBI interviews in which a survivor accuses President Trump of heinous crimes. It would subpoena anyone who asked on which night there would be the wildest party on Epstein Island." The Epstein files revealed that Elon Musk asked Jeffrey Epstein that question. When are the Republicans going to subpoena Elon Musk and ask him if he ever went to the wildest party on Epstein Island? And ask him under oath. Make him answer that question under oath. And Secretary Clinton spoke authoritatively on the larger issue of sex trafficking, including the sex trafficking of children. She said, quote, "If you are new to this issue, let me tell you, Jeffrey Epstein was a heinous individual, but he's far from alone. This is not a one-off tabloid sensation or a political scandal. It's a global scourge with an unimaginable human toll. My work combating sex trafficking goes back to my days as First Lady. I worked to pass the first federal legislation against trafficking and was proud that my husband signed the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, which increased support for survivors and gave prosecutors better tools for going after traffickers." Let's hear from Melania Trump about what she has done in her position as First Lady about sex trafficking or anything else. Hillary Clinton described what she did as Secretary of State. "I oversaw nearly 170 anti-trafficking programs in 70 nations and directly pressed foreign leaders to crack down on trafficking networks in their countries. Every year, we published a global report to shine a light on abuses. The findings of those reports triggered sanctions by countries failing to make progress, so they became a powerful diplomatic tool to drive concrete action. I insisted that the United States be included in the report for the first time ever in 2011 because we must hold ourselves not just to the same standard as the rest of the world, but to an even higher one. Sex trafficking and modern slavery should have no place in America. None. Infuriatingly, the Trump administration gutted the Trafficking in Persons Office at the State Department, cutting more than 70% of the career civil and foreign service experts who worked so hard to prevent trafficking crimes. The message from the Trump administration to the American people and the world could not be clearer. Combating human trafficking is no longer an American priority under the Trump White House. That is a tragedy. It's a scandal. It deserves vigorous investigation and oversight. A committee endeavoring to stop human trafficking would seek to understand what specific steps are needed to fix a system that allowed Epstein to get away with his crimes in 2008. It would demand that Secretary Rubio and Attorney General Bondi testify about why this administration is abandoning survivors and playing into the hands of traffickers. It would put forth legislation to provide more resources and force this administration to act. But that's not happening.
The distraction machine. And now I want to talk about something that doesn't get enough coverage. The timing every single time the Epstein story gains momentum, every time a new document drops, every time a member of Congress makes noise, something else suddenly demands our attention. A tariff announcement.
President Trump on-again, off-again tariff deadline is now just hours away. The White House is scrambling to make deals as business and consumers brace for the impact.
A social media fight, a foreign policy crisis. We have to be honest about what's happening, whether it's intentional, distraction, or just the chaos of this administration. The effect is the same. The Epstein cover-up stays buried under a mountain of other headlines, and the most loyal supporters, they bend themselves into pretzels trying to defend it. The same people who spent years screaming, "No more foreign wars," are now cheering on military escalation abroad, including the bombing of a school.
Video appears to show a U.S. airstrike on an Iranian military base right next to the elementary school where Iranian state media says more than 160 girls were killed. CNN's Isabel Young looks at the video and the evidence that suggests the U.S. may be responsible for that strike on the school.
We've seen some really grotesque remarks saying, "Oh, well, that's less future terrorists." What? That's inhumane, barbaric, and immoral. And a war crime. The same people who claim to care about children trafficking are now dismissing a woman who went to the FBI 4 separate times as not credible. They were told the Epstein Files would expose Democrats. When Republicans and Trump associates turned up instead, the story changed overnight. Now it's a fake documents, political attacks, and exoneration. Totally exonerated. No. The goalpost moves every single time. Let me be clear about something. I'm not saying everyone who voted for Trump is evil or doesn't care about children. I'm saying you were used. You were told a story about who the bad guys were, and when the actual evidence pointed somewhere else, the people who told you that story changed the narrative without missing a beat. That's manipulation, and it's worth naming. Watch this clip from Midas Touch, the Epstein Files, Republicans implicated coverage.
So just for an example of what Trump, state regime media, MAGA Republicans don't want us talking about. It's things like this. Democratic Congress member James Walkinshaw from Virginia. We've had him on the Midas Touch Network before. Here he talks about reviewing some of the redacted Epstein files in the unredacted facility at the Department of Justice headquarters. He goes, when you read these, it's clear that Trump never kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago. That's all a lie. It's clear that Epstein was always a guest and was someone who could go back to Mar-a-Lago whenever. Watch what Walkinshaw says here. Play this clip.
I read a redacted document, illegally redacted in my view, where Epstein's lawyers had spoken to Trump, and Trump made it clear that he never kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago. Why does he keep lying? Why has he done everything in his power to cover this up? Those are important questions, not to take away from any of the other individuals involved here.
And then you have what Jason Leopold wrote about how Epstein filed FOIA requests with the CIA requesting documents regarding his affiliations with the CIA between 1999 and 2011 and the NSA for documents relating or referring to himself. Epstein didn't receive any records. He got letters back basically saying, we can't return classified information. Here's the letter from July 29th, 2011 from the CIA to Epstein. Okay, this is not me going into some conspiratorial territory. I'm reading for you the letter from the CIA to Epstein's lawyer, Martin G. Weinberg. Dear Mr. Weinberg, it says on July 25th, 2011, we received your letter pertaining to Jeffrey Epstein's Privacy Act request. It says you provided the necessary information in accordance with the Freedom of Information. We've searched, and it says we're unable to locate any information or records. However, it says, with respect to responsive records that would reveal a classified connection to the CIA in accordance with Section 3.6 Sub A of Executive Order 13526 as amended, the CIA can neither confirm nor deny the existence or non-existence of records responsive to your request. The fact of the existence or non-existence of requested records is currently improperly classified and is intelligence sources and methods information that is protected from disclosure by Section 6 of the CIA Act. Although our searches were thorough and diligent, and is highly unlikely that repeating those searches would change the result, you nevertheless have a legal right to appeal the decision, and it's signed the Information Privacy Coordinator of the CIA. Then on July 30th, 2014, this was sent to Mr. Indyke, one of Epstein's representative. This replies to your letter dated March 5th, 2014, appealing on behalf of your client, Jeffrey Epstein, the National Security Agency, Central Security Services, denial of his request of a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act records, files, communications, memorandum, orders, and agreements, and or instructions referring to or related from Mr. Epstein that were created from January 1, 2000 to January 2, 2014, and were prepared, received, transmitted, collected, and or maintained by the National Security Agency. I have reviewed this request and your letter of appeal. As a result result of my review, I have concluded that the appropriate response is to continue to neither confirm nor deny the existence or non-existence of any intelligence material on the subject of your client's request pertaining to any NSA CSS intelligence programs or activities, including to programs authorized under Section 215 of the U.S. Patriot Act and Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act amended. To do otherwise would challenge under FOIA would result in the exposure of intelligence information, sources, and methods which could harm our national security and severely undermine NSA CSS activities in general. For example, if NSA CSS denied having information in cases where we had no such information but remained silent in cases in which the information existed, it would tend to reveal in which activities NSA and CSS were engaged. Any further elaboration concerning these matters would reveal information that is currently and properly classified. Why aren't more people talking about this? I mean, hat tip to Jason Leopold for posting this. And then you compare that to other letters. I mean, you've got messages from Epstein to the former heads of the CIA, linking him with Peter Thiel. You have Bill Burns right here. Bill Peter. I think you two would enjoy each other. Or William Burns to Epstein, former CIA director to Epstein. Some retirement. Look forward to seeing you again soon. And enjoy the green blue sea in the meantime. Dude, Epstein knew all these people. Epstein was working with the former prime minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Norway, the royal family there. He was working with national security advisors in Eastern European countries. He was speaking intermediaries directly with Vladimir Putin. He was speaking with Bannon on a day-to-day basis about working on overthrowing Pope Francis. He was working on propping up Jair Bolsonaro, who became the insurrectionist MAGA president of Brazil. He knew about the annexation of Crimea before that was going to take place. And he told people in the Epstein class to short the ruble right before the annexation. He talked about getting Putin and others to start purchasing Bitcoin and crypto back in like 2013, 2014. I mean, he was involved in all of this stuff. He was the center. He was the intermediary. As I've said before, and I talked about this on the Midas Touch podcast, Donald Trump is a vessel of the Epstein class. And Donald Trump essentially, was like all these other basically props that they had, people part of the Epstein class hoisting up this right-wing destruction of global order while using sex trafficking as their currency. I mean, it was absolutely sick. So with all of this going on, I mean, I think I showed you the clip you've seen before of Donald Trump saying the Epstein Files vindicate him. Total win, shows that he's done nothing wrong. I don't need to play that clip again. You've seen him say that on Air Force One. I did a whole video about it yesterday. But I just find it interesting what they're doing on state regime media to try to have people look the other way. And they're really making efforts now to rig the midterms because they know Donald Trump is toast. They know the Epstein Files have just completely exposed this regime as a pedo regime, as a regime that protects pedos, and it's involved in covering up child sex trafficking. The cabal is right there in the White House. It's sick. I don't care what political party it is. These are depraved, sick animals in the White House. And how else do you want me to describe these sickos? And everything they've been saying about QAnon and Pizzagate, they're doing all this stuff. These sickos.
The pattern and bigger picture. Let's zoom out for a second because this story is bigger than one man or one survivor. Jeffrey Epstein ran what federal prosecutors have called one of the most extensive child sex trafficking networks in American history. He had access to heads of state, billionaires, celebrities, and political figures across party lines. His operation was protected for decades. He received a sweetheart deal from prosecutors in 2008 under the Bush administration, a deal negotiated by U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, who later became Trump's labor secretary. which is just messed up. The Epstein story is ultimately a story about how wealth and power protect predators, how institutions fail survivors, how the powerful use legal threats, financial settlements, and documented suppression to bury the truth. Right now, Ghislaine Maxwell, the woman who prosecutors say actually recruited and groomed many of Epstein's victims, is serving 20 years. But she was moved to a minimum security prison against federal policy. A DOJ insider recorded without his knowledge said she's being offered something to keep her mouth shut. Survivors deserve better than this. The young girl who sat across from the FBI agents 4 times and told them what happened to her deserves better than this. Every child that passed through that network, all over 1,000 of them, deserve justice, not redactions and not harassment. Closing call to action. So what do we do about it? First, please share this video. Share it everywhere on your social media platforms, anywhere you can. The algorithm doesn't want this story trending. You are the algorithm override. Second, contact your representatives, Democrats and Republicans. Demand the full release of all 6 million Epstein documents. Demand Pam Bondi testify. Demand Trump testify. Melania, anyone connected. Third, vote in 2026. The midterms will determine whether Democrats retake the House Oversight Committee and finally have the power to issue those subpoenas. Fourth, follow the independent journalists who broke this story. Roger Sullenberg on Substack, NPR's investigative team, NBC News national security correspondent Laura Strickler, and MS Now. And if you're watching this and you know something, if you have information about this case or any case related to Epstein's network, there are survivor advocacy organizations and attorneys who are still fighting. You are not alone. You are never alone. This is the Exposed News Outlet. We shed light on topics that matter most. Please like, subscribe, share, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching till the end. As always, be kind to yourselves and be kind to others. Thank you.